Louis emerged from the darkness. The moment the light was turned on, it illuminated his face, which was as pale as cloth. But before he became a 217-year-old monster, he was first and foremost a human being. In 1791, at the age of 24, Louis lost his wife. He spent his days wandering drunk in the cemetery, hoping his wife would crawl out of her grave and take him away. His self-destructive, dog-like demeanor soon attracted a dark elf of the Blood Clan. The dark elf bit Louis, but did not take his life. She threw him into the sea, letting the cold water wash away his desire to die. Louis fell seriously ill after returning home. The dark elf came to his bedside and told him that if he played with her, he could gain eternal life. And eternal life, like death, could solve all suffering. Louis was tempted by this deal. He went to the cemetery to watch the last sunrise, and voluntarily offered his neck to the dark elf. After a brief dizziness, his pupils focused into deep green eyes. With the elf's eyes, he finally saw the beauty of the night. The statue could gaze back at him, and the owl could be charmed away by him. The price was that he dared not look in the mirror anymore, fearing to see the pale, ugly face reflected back at him. The dark elf Les gave Louis a brand new life. He even moved into Louis' house to live with him. When the sun was shining brightly, the two would lie in the coffin and sleep soundly. When the stars and moon shone together, the two would go out side by side. Les loved to chat about all sorts of interesting things from all over the world. Louis occasionally felt annoyed, but at least his world was no longer as gloomy as a tombstone. But Louis soon realized he had been deceived. The secret to the vampire clan's eternal youth was the need to constantly feed on blood. Les always chose young, beautiful targets to lay eggs, but Louis couldn't bring himself to bite his own kind. Les also considered Louis's feelings, and quickly found an adulterous old woman for him. The old woman's life was nearing its end, and she was a morally flawed person, which would minimize Louis's sense of guilt. Hunger constantly tempted Louis to lose his humanity, but after a fierce struggle, he let the old woman go. Instead, he turned his attention to her little dog. The old woman screamed in terror. Les swiftly snapped her neck. He cleaned up the mess for Louis, but Louis was not grateful. He grabbed Les by the neck and began to struggle. For the first time, a crack appeared on his gentle face, but Les didn't get angry. He just smiled. He had been wandering alone in the world for 400 years. He thought everything was boring, but when he saw Louis' soul being tortured, he knew he had found an immortal spirit. Louis felt that he and Les weren't on the same path, so he started saving small animals on the farm. But the piles of human animal corpses grew ever higher. The slaves on the estate felt immense panic. They began to try to drive out the evil spirits. They even came to Louis with torches to demand an explanation. Moreover, the food in the house had never been touched. The maidservant also began to suspect Louis. In the struggle, Louis accidentally killed the maidservant. The chaos and loss of life finally brought him to his senses. He couldn't have both eternal life and live like a normal person. There was no such thing as having it both ways in this world. So Louis set the estate on fire and buried himself in the flames. He didn't want the things that could only be obtained by making a choice. But Lise wouldn't accept that. She saved Louis because Louis was a child who dared to burn himself. Lise dared not act rashly. The little prince was angry. He could only pamper and spoil him. Louis refused to bite people, so he had to go after the rats in the sewers. Lise found him disgusting, but she never stopped it. They couldn't get close to each other, nor could they stay apart. They could only maintain this strange harmony until the little girl Dia appeared. Her parents had died of the Black Death. Louis hugged Dia tenderly. He was unconsciously drawn to the scent on Dia's body. He bit her without thinking, but at the last moment he regained his senses and held on to the last line of humanity. Unbeknownst to him, Les had witnessed the scene. He jumped up and down in excitement, mocking Louis as a merciful murderer. He must have loved his own kind crime. Louis turned and walked away in anger. Les knew he would eventually lose Louis, but he understood human nature. When a couple can no longer bind each other with love, they create a child. He and Louis were like a mutated couple. By creating another vampire child, he could keep Louis firmly by his side. So he reached out to Dia, creating another plaything for himself. She quickly accepted her new identity as a vampire fairy. With a maid in tow, he feasted to his heart's content. Beneath an angelic face lay a murderous spark. A true demon had been created. Louis watched the scene in disbelief. He knew he had ruined this little girl's life. He embraced Dia with a heavy heart, determined to take responsibility for her for the rest of his life. Dia became a pawn, designed to bind Les and Louis together forever. The three of them found a place to settle down. Father Les and Daddy Louis began to care for her diligently. Immortality prevented them from staying in one place for long. They had to move every 10 years, but each move involved 3 people and 3 coffins. Louis and Les were stabilized by this ordinary life. They never spoke of their romance, claiming it was all for the child. But 2 men and a child can form a family. 2 men and a woman cannot. Dia turned 37. That year, her feelings for Louis changed.